Hi, everyone. Welcome, Plato community. I am Janice Little, SVP of Engineering at SheerID, an identity marketing platform. So SheerID allows brands to create personalized gated offers for students, military, healthcare workers, and other influential consumer communities. With me today is Stacie, Fredrik, and I'm excited to moderate this fireside chat about diversity in engineering, how leaders can build and grow diverse teams. Welcome.
Thanks. Hey, Janice. How are you doing today?
I'm great. It's great to be here. So Stacie, maybe you could just kick it off by telling us a little bit about your background.
Sure. My background, so currently I'm working at Butterfly Network. We work on a portable ultrasound device, which is a pretty cool technology. It actually allows us to put in the hands of doctors ultrasound capability, which previously has always been like a centralized device, right? So all of a sudden now it can be with everyone. So it's nice. It is health tech. It is democratizing healthcare, putting a capability that once was just centralized into the hands of a bunch of people, starting with doctors and eventually getting down into maybe even people like you and I into our homes. So pretty exciting. So leading up the software engineering team there, a young company, a young team. So lots to build, which for me is fun. I like to do that. And previous to that was at Collective Health, another health tech company, a little bit from a different point of view from the employer insurance side. So administration of that. And then previous to that at Amazon, so a little bit of consumer digital assistance, and then also large and small companies, early stage startups. One was a medical device company, and then larger with lots of enterprise software. So been kind of doing a lot of different things, seen a lot of different companies. So it's been a fun ride, but all software. So that's been, I haven't gone past software, but I would say one thing that is great about software is it takes you to all different types of things, all different types of problems, industries, and that's what for me makes it really fun.
Awesome, thank you. And I saw that you have lots of different growth stages in your history, and even some human resources development, which I'm sure is going to help for today. So that's great. So thank you. I'll just tee this off the discussion with a couple of questions, and then we can jump into audience QA as well. So for the audience out there, feel free to add or upvote questions in the Q&A tab wherever you see it. But I'll just get us started. So first, we're talking about diversity. Diversity can mean gender identity, ethnicity, even just the way you think, right? So what does diversity mean to you?
Yeah, so diversity to me it's interesting because when you talk about this, and especially just thinking in terms of like my career, right? When we started, diversity was very much like women because it was the most obvious thing. And so it starts there, but for me today, it really is much broader than that. It's beyond just gender. It is beyond just how we look. It really does get down into the perspectives that we bring from either our professional backgrounds and a lot of times even our personal backgrounds. Because if you're developing things that do touch everyday users, like a very broad customer base, then that's the type of thinking, that's the type of perspective that you actually want to bring to the table, right? When you're building products, when you're trying to solve problems. And so for me, diversity is a very broad, it basically is bringing in all the different aspects of people from their career backgrounds to their personal backgrounds, to their education, to the even the types of things that they like to do. Sometimes your side projects helps you to have a different perspective. And so it is just bringing those different perspectives together. To me, that's, it's a pretty broad meaning.
Absolutely. So those are some great points. They could be cultural, your language, your religion, your nationality, all of those things, your experiences. So, sometimes we don't think about those skills, that you have, but your job level, the way you think, your thinking styles, and how projects may have affected you in the past. And then also those physical characteristics, right? Of age. Absolutely. Or physical abilities, you see. So I love it. And, it's definitely a mind, we were talking before we came on, it's definitely a mindset, right? Of celebrating those differences as well. So that's great.
Absolutely.
Okay, so moving on here. So we've sort of defined diversity. What is just your general take on the state of diversity on engineering teams today?
Yeah, I would say it's, and from the different places I've been to, the different teams that I've had, it varies widely. So I've definitely come into places where there hasn't been a lot of diversity, and then some places where there's fantastic diversity. Like you actually see a great variety in terms of um, the types of different roles within a team, types of backgrounds, levels of experience. Sometimes you would get a really great mix, and then other times you do see teams that kind of everyone looks alike. And so it is all over the board. It'll, like for me, even at Butterfly, I'm relatively new coming into that company about 6 months. And so really trying to figure out, okay, where is this team in terms of diversity? And I would say as a young team, it's something that we definitely can work on. And so it is kind of you see a lot of different things, which is great because it means it's not like we're at this level of, we're at a baseline, like a low baseline everywhere I go. It's actually, we're seeing some bright spots, some places that are really doing a nice job of bringing in more of a mixed team. So it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
But we can always do better.
That's right. That's right. And it's, we could get, we could get into the deeply, I'm sure, into the systemic challenges, and sort of the uphill battles that teams face today. We see, we're seeing definitely like underrepresented groups, taking, less classes, going into less roles in engineering, and how that plays into the hiring funnel and all of that. I think we can all agree that tech is sort of this, wondrous equalizing opportunity that should be available to all. And I'm hopeful that at least what I've seen recently, is more awareness, right?
Yeah.
Just recently, where it's, you have these recent highlights of the social justice issues and underrepresented groups that are sort of being driven out of the workforce, especially women during the pandemic.
Yeah.
One
thing that I do think has made a difference more recently is, so one thing that social media has helped, I think, is to create more communities, because now we can go right across. It's not just local to you, which I know when I started was very much like within the company you're at. Like, was there a community for you, or could you create a more broad community? But now with social media, as well as I think the younger generations who are much more used to using social media and creating community and connection that way, that I think there are better ways of supporting each other and actually having better voices and better visibility into, there's a whole section of folks that are like they identify as similar, and so there's a way to reach them, as well as they're able to better support each other and just make themselves better known that we exist. Like, when you go through your hiring manager reviews of resumes, maybe you don't see us, but we know we exist. So as a hiring manager, I can say, hey, have you tapped into this type of community, or this type of person, or even this location? So it is great. The visibility, I think, alone makes a big difference.
That's a great point. Yeah, we call them affinity groups at SheerID, and there's Slack channels and a lot of safe spaces that you can create even within your own company as well. Yeah, and I love your point about social media. I feel like there's been so much introspection by everyone. Saying what can I do now? As an individual leader, on my team, on my company, what can I do to be an example? Okay, let's get into diversity in leadership. Yeah. So this is a topic often talked about, even as we see more individual contributors, having diversity, as engineers get promoted to managers, directors, VPs, E-team, diversity, we see diversity tends to lessen. How can we address diversity in leadership?
Yeah, and that is one area when I said that, we see places where we're actually getting better with diversity. I would say consistently it's one area where we still have tremendous challenges, is as you move up the ladder, it is much more consistent in terms of not seeing it. And I would say, so I have, from within my own experience, very concrete recent example of having a very high leadership in a very large company meeting. And I was the only woman at the table, as well as one of the few, like maybe 3 of us, people of color, around a table of maybe 15 to 20 people, like very senior leadership in a very large company. And when I see that, it really just makes me step back and say, okay, we still do have a lot of work to do. And it also really encourages me and gives me conviction that as a leader, one of my takeaways out of that was, okay, I need to, 1, stay in the game because it makes a difference. And then 2 is, what can I do within my scope of influence and even just people that I see and people that I work with? What can I do to encourage more people to come up into the ranks and give them to support, encouragement to keep going? Because it is, as you go up, it becomes more and more difficult. And then we do get into questioning of, should I keep going? And is it worth the extra effort? Because you do feel like a lot of times you are still kind of bumping up against that glass ceiling that you kind of have to either nudge through or break through. But it does make a difference when you have others there. And the other thing that I know out of my own experience also is, when I was coming up, I didn't have a lot of leaders that I could look at and say, okay, yeah, I could see myself doing that. Or that's someone that I would model after, or I can see that they can do it, so why can't I do it? And so that's another reason, again, that I've taken back, and as well as I try to intentionally invest in the folks around me of all types to also encourage them to be leaders, right? And particularly, though, for the ones that are representing folks who don't have models. So I do think it's really important we have models, and then also folks who are, walking the talk, because we do right now, we have got a lot of talk around a lot of these topics. And so what do we do in concrete terms? And part of it is just showing up every day. I can't stress enough how much difference that makes. Just coming in, holding that leadership position, like basically being your person, being true to yourself, and doing the job in the way that you do it, even if it's different or sometimes tough, because it makes a difference to everyone that sees you. And sometimes we don't realize that as leaders. Basically, the impact we make just by showing up every day and working the way we work. And so part of, I'll tell you another story. One of the things I did at one of the companies I was at, a large internet company that started out selling books, was I thought, well, I want to try to invest in folks. Do I have to do this like a big program? Is I have to get some support, go to HR, have some kind of event? And it was as simple as just saying, hey, let's just have lunch and start talking to each other about what are some of the challenges you're facing. And it doesn't have to be, I feel like I'm a woman, I want to be a more leader. Like, what does it take? It was just like, what are your challenges? And so we would cover a lot of, different things. And I thought, okay, it was just lunch. So I was like, it was my minimum. And when I left, those women that I was meeting with, they actually took me to dinner and said, those lunches, those made a big difference to me. And so we don't understand like the impact that we can make in very small things. And so I would encourage everyone to not think it has to be a big program, has to be a big thing. You can actually start very small. And a lot of it is going back to this idea of community, because that is where we actually can have that safe discussion, that bringing up of things that actually matters to each one of us, and not just the programmatic. So it is, how do we make those things very real? Because end of the day, right, what we really want to see is that this whole idea of diversity, inclusion, that actually is in the way we work. It's in the everyday things. It's in the everyday conversations. It's not just the, reciting of the things that we say, like, these are our principles. No, it's about how we just interact with one another and have conversations and invite each other in to the conversation. So that's why it's the communities where we make these things really real. And sometimes it is let's just do something simple. Let's just connect. Let's just start to build these relationships so that we can then understand what do our teams need, what our organizations need, and then it starts to go out from there, right? And so that's just some of my learnings in terms of some of the places I've been.
That's beautiful. I'm feeling inspired already, Stacie. This is good. And I love the point that, oftentimes it's just right there, like under your nose, right? That, how can you just look at the person next to you, and say, okay, I could coach this person to find their leadership voice, or I could, I'm a big fan of like rating. Sorry, let's see, I don't know who's listening out there, but rating your support teams and and your technical support teams, especially, you already have someone who knows your product, you already have someone who's a great communicator. So just figuring out, what's your path. That's really great. And I certainly am a big fan of the modeling and alignment as well. And I love that you shared a personal experience there as well. This was certainly my experience. I was hired by our CEO with a 3-month-old baby, and I went in and I was like, I don't know how I feel about, changing jobs right now, and he's just said, oh, I had twins, when I started SheerID, like, you'll be fine, get in here, and I was like, okay, I was shocked. I was kind of like, okay. But, only years later do I see, one, the sort of person that he is. And then also, like that he was ready to do that. He was, he was prepared and aligned to do that. So, I feel you got me all fired up. I love it.
At the same time, everyone in that company that saw you doing that as a mother with a very young child, that hey, she can do that, and she is a fantastic leader. It doesn't take away anything from the way she does her job. Like, that speaks volumes, right? Maybe even more volumes than a training session, than a class.
Absolutely.
And so that's why, again, right?
Yeah.
We just need to show up a lot of times. Show up and then just be real, and and then invest in those people next to us, which is sometimes it feels really hard. Like, do I need a formal thing? Like, do I need all the PowerPoints and to be able to sure, like, it's all these verified by studies and books and people, public speakers and whatever. It's like, no, sometimes you just need to have lunch.
Just have lunch. I love food anyway, so is like, now I can multitask. I love it. Okay, so for the leaders out there, for the leaders in the audience, how can we better create an environment that supports and encourages diversity? And similarly, how can leaders support the diversity?
Yeah, I do think it doesn't come by just wanting it to. It does take work and a lot of intention. And it is something that easily falls down in the priority. And you can think of it even as simply as when you go to hire, right? This is often a thing that when we think about diversity, you think, okay, I'm going to put some diversity objectives and numbers, things I can measure. And even just going through that process, you can see that you do have to remind, like, your recruiters, like, hey, I haven't seen a different type of person or background in the last 10 people I've looked at. Like, there is a regular reminding that you have to stay on top of, because it isn't easy. And that is because of the numbers. And so it does take intention. It does take a focus on it to make sure that it stays top of mind for you, because then people know it's important and it'll help them to keep it top of mind as well, because they're also fighting different things in terms of numbers. So in terms of how do we create that environment, it is are we looking for those places? Are we keeping it? Are we keeping it at the top of how we are doing? How do you fold it into the work that you're doing? So the projects you're working on, how you build teams together, building new people or bringing different types of people together, sometimes even. As well as I do think it makes a big difference. What's interesting right now is there is a lot more talk around diversity and how important it is. Sometimes to me, it's a little bit of noise. And so for my team, I know we're at the beginning cycle of getting better at diversity and inclusion. For me, it's like, also, are we doing our homework? Because when we invite new people in, even if we are doing a great job of recruiting people in, do we have that environment that's going to be supportive and allow them to feel comfortable as well as grow, just like everyone else is? And so it's are you doing the work at home? And then are you then, creating more opportunities for more people to come in to just broaden the types of the diversity of your team? But that homework also is, where is your team in terms of diversity, inclusion, and creating a safe space, right, for everyone. And so then looking at that and what are the needs there? Is there a need for, whether it's just training and awareness, or even a language for the things that we want to do or want not to do? And then also, how do we keep ourselves accountable to these? If we decide this is what we want to do, this is what we want to be, how do we then keep ourselves accountable to that? But it helps to have all the pieces in terms of our values, our language around how do we talk about it, and then, okay, then how do we make sure that we're actually following through with it and doing it? And that's pretty high level, I know, but those are my first thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's spot on. Again, it goes back to the day to day, right? Language matters, culture matters, and it does start with your values, and both your personal values and the values, coming from the company, right? Like one of our company values is, seek diverse ideas, right? And that's how we define empathy, right? Deliberately seeking diverse ideas to understand one another. So, I think, you're spot on. It is words, but I do think leadership does have a responsibility to step in and say, this is the path, right? This is the right way.
Yeah, and the other thing, one other comment is just on diversity. It's interesting because I've been having a lot of conversations around like quality and security. Like this goes back to the technical in terms of the work we do, and even reliability. And the idea around these is that they're not things that we tack on at the end, right? They are actually need to be built into the culture, into the day-to-day of how everyone does their work. And diversity is similar into that. It's not something you just tack on top. It is something that you need to build into your culture, into how you do your work on a regular basis. And then, yes, it is, once you've assessed kind of where your team is at, then figuring out, okay, what are the metrics? What are the ways that we can signal to ourselves that we're actually doing better at this? Whether it's within your performance reviews, it's a critical thing that you're getting reviewed on, or it's a feedback for your managers, or it's in the recruiting, like how's our pipeline, or the way that we show up in interviews. So then picking out what are the concrete things that you hope will help to get the right signal to, yes, we're actually making progress on this. But again, those are where it gets really interesting, because you have to then dig into like what are those right signals that you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is all these things you can tack on for sure. I don't want to pass those over either. I would say like all the ships, the sponsorships, the partnerships, mentor internships, all the ships. But definitely, how do you connect these broad ideas to concrete behaviors and things that you're looking for? Well, I could share too. One of the things that we did recently is take a look at our DEI statement. If you don't have one, you can have one. It's important, but really look at how you can connect that statement to how your product, how your teams operate, how you operate as a business, right? So, for us at SheerID, it's like we're identity, right? That's what we're identity verification. So, our DEI statement is like, make SheerID a place where all identities, can belong. Right. And for you, it might be, making, you have a lot of themes, in what you said earlier about healthcare and accessibility and affordability, all of that access stuff, I'm sure that plays into how, DEI manifests at your company. So I would just encourage everybody to kind of think about how to draw those connections,
Yeah, that's great. The more we can tie these things in together, right? It helps us make sure that it's not just yet another thing that we have to do.
Right.
It is baked into the way that we do our work, right? And that's where you are going to have greater chance of success. And the end of the day result, which is that this is just how we are, right? And this is what the environment that we're creating, because this is what we want to see in us, in each other, and what we work. It's not just it's a test or a single thing. It is a very comprehensive element.
Okay, before we get to Q&A here, I'll ask you one last question, which is, what's one goal that you're focused on related to diversity for your team this year?
Yeah, and this is a super boring one and this is a statement in terms of kind of where we are at as a team. It is a young team, and I would say our diversity numbers in terms of how many women, quite frankly, simple. We're at step one. And it's like, how many women do we have on our team? And I would say our percentages are lower than I would like. It's even below industry standards. So for me, a big one is, okay, how do we get ourselves on a ramp to getting closer to that? And then also looking at what am I doing? What are we investing in to make sure we're creating the right environment? Because even if I'm like making a big push in recruiting to add more, even just women, it's not a good idea to not have the right place for them to be and thrive. And so kind of working on both ends of that, but really in terms of the hard number, really trying to change at least that one stat. So giving myself a little bit of a concrete thing there.
And that's great. Everyone has to start where they are, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and acknowledging that is leadership, right? And it's the same. We're working on building diverse pipelines and teams as well. So that's great. Okay, let's move into some Q&A.
Sure.
So our most upvoted question, do you try to reinforce diversity in hiring, and how?
Yep. So yes, I try to. Some of the things that I do is looking at pipeline. So like, how many resumes am I seeing from different types of backgrounds? And when I look at resumes, it's nice because you see the whole person. So you actually can say, okay, these are looking very much the same. And you can actually say things like, it's okay if they don't have a CS background. It's okay if they haven't gone to these schools, like other schools are okay, or different types of companies besides the one that you typically are targeting. So it is great to be able to, because you also have nice numbers, right? You see a broad range. You can start to say, okay, I'd like to start seeing much more, like a different percentage of types of either resumes or candidates that we're seeing, as well on our side in terms of what we can do to make it more inviting, so that once you do get someone in, is like on our interview panels, do we have women or other types of group, folks that we have? Are those folks showing up on interviews? Do we all look the same? Because if we do, then that's also not a good thing. So how are we including more different types of folks into our interview panels, which is all great training, by the way, career-wise. So doing that, and then also, how are those teams looking? So as we're start to build out different teams, what are the composition, skills, levels of experience, backgrounds, disciplines that they've been in, types of companies? Are we building good comprehensive teams as well? So those are some of the things.
Absolutely. Yeah. Just trying to remove bias, making
Yeah.
sure independent feedback is happening, training, all of those are great. I've seen people, if you have the time, to say, okay, we're going to have an underrepresented person in every candidate pool, so there's lots of things you can do. You definitely don't have to come up with it yourself. There's lots of stuff online too to help this. Okay, maybe we'll go for one more speed round here. Where do I look for diverse candidates? We do many things to attract diverse candidates, but they are far and few. What are the various channels that companies leverage?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, and I think and we've been doing a lot of hiring in the last few months. I would say it's different according to what type of skill set you're looking for, because depending on the area of, say, technology that you're going after, there'll be different communities. There'll be different ways that those communities get together, and how best to either identify them, tap into them, as well as that there are certain companies that do have great programs that encourage, either women or people of color or even different backgrounds. And so oftentimes you can also, have those be some of your sources, and or looking for folks who have either been at those types of companies and maybe even come out, right, at some point were there, or are currently at. And so sometimes that's a good way to try to find those differences, different folks, as well as sometimes you have to get really creative. Like if there are conferences, if there are, like, again, if you're on social media, tap into people to find out what are sometimes you have to keep digging, right? You talk to one person, okay, is there a group? Is there somehow that I can tap into this community of folks, and then and then talk to another person, or is there another set of people? And then do you know people? And you just have to it does take effort. I would say that is the biggest thing. You can't just run a single search on LinkedIn and get the types of candidates you need. Sometimes it does take that little bit of effort of going outside. Sometimes there's different job boards. There are so many different kinds now in terms of reaching out to different types of groups. So it is keep asking. So talk to folks, keep asking, take those steps, right? Keep plowing through it, keep digging in.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely an opportunity to, build your partners, like Advancing Women in Tech and other places like that. Okay, that should wrap it up. The time flies here. So, this has been a great learning experience with you today. Thank you so much. Big thank you to Plato for bringing us all together. Big thank you to Lohika for helping us, address this important topic. And thank you, Stacie, for sharing your wisdom with us. Yeah, I hope all of you in the audience feel better equipped to build and grow diverse teams. And I wish you all a wonderful day. Thank you, Stacie.